welcome to Coffee with Keiko. This is our pilot episode of number one. You're in for a ride. But who we have here, this is Keiko the Whale, who the podcast is named after. I'm your naturalist, Kyla, and this is Paige, who is not a naturalist. And the point of this episode is to dive in and to have a fun conversation about everything marine mammals. Um, and I guess with my background with that, I am a naturalist here in the Pacific Northwest. So that is where my expertise is. That is the species that I see on a daily basis that I love to talk about. But we're really going to be kind of diving into a lot of different topics, not just the Pacific Northwest, really trying to be a global reach on the species we include. And with that, my background, I have a bachelor's of science in aquatic and fishery sciences with a marine biology minor, and then a master's in the marine and environmental affairs. Um, so I like science and I love talking about science, and that's essentially my role as a naturalist, is to be that environmental educator and show people who maybe have never seen whales before and talk to them anything about they want to know or the ecosystem that the whales live in. So that's getting us
And
started.
yeah, and my credentials is I like animals.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Well,
dinosaurs, which dinosaurs are animals.
yeah,
And
dinosaurs.
yeah, so if you're listening, Paige has a poster of a dinosaur poster behind her.
Yep.
And that won't change because her entire room
It's
is
so much
covered in
dinosaurs.
dinosaurs.
Yep. So maybe we can move around to get some different dinosaurs, but we've got a stegosaurus and some other things. Yeah. Just so the viewers know, we're across the country sometimes from each other, but we're longtime friends. And most of our conversation is just me questioning. I gotta learn about whales. Are whales fish?
We often hear people say, "It was like, oh, they're just fish," because one of the nicknames for orca are blackfish. Um, but it's not actually always wrong to say, no, they're not fish. Like, so we're gonna go into that evolutionary history. So hold with me. Don't quit because I said it's not wrong to call them fish. You'll hear why. But in the newer classifications, they're defined as a mammal. And so what a mammal is it's a lineage that has the derived characteristics of that family are things like having hair and having mammary glands, and mammary glands produce milk. So many of the lineages of species we see across the world, many of them don't have mammary glands. That's not how they raise their young, if they raise their young at all. So that's a trait that's really specific to the mammal group. And that's where the word mammal and mammary comes from. The origin of that word is in Latin. The word for essentially female breast or teat is mamma, so mammary gland, and then mammal based on that trait. And that immediately will actually confuse people. It's like, okay, whales are mammals. Where's their hair? What do you mean they have mammary glands? Like, how does that work? And
I've
it's
never
very
seen a whale boob.
exactly. Yeah, most people haven't. Most people don't think about it. Yeah, so the hair part. We'll start with that, and then we'll go to the mammary gland. For dolphin species, we'll get to
Wait,
this. Yeah,
dolphins?
I know. This is what having
Whales?
dolphins, we'll get to this, but dolphins are toothed whales, so it's not
Okay.
wrong. It's actually very correct to call a dolphin a whale. So
Okay.
when we're saying are whales mammals, we are including dolphins with this.
Okay.
Okay.
Dolphins, whales. Umbrella.
Umbrella. The
Got it.
scientific term for this is called cetacean. So
Cetacean.
cetacean,
Not a
whales,
citation. We're not speeding. Cetacean.
cetacean, C-E-tation. So cetaceans, whales, and dolphins. Um, when I say whales, I mean like baleen whales, right? Since dolphins are also whales, we just don't call those species. We don't say like bottlenose dolphin whale, but we say humpback whale, which is why people oftentimes get confused about that, right? So baleen whales, toothed whales, those are the two kind of main splits between the umbrella term of whale and cetacean. But these two lineages split in the family of whale millions of years ago. And so they do have some characteristic differences, like toothed whales have teeth like us. Baleen whales don't have teeth like us. They have plates of baleen that hang down from their upper jaw. Baleen is made out of keratin, so same stuff as your hair and your nails. Oftentimes, when I'm talking with kids, I basically say, imagine a big frilled fingernail in your mouth, but you have 400 of them, and it helps you essentially act like a net to catch your food and swallow it whole. That's what baleen does. But baleen whales and toothed whales, all whales. And so for the toothed whales, such as dolphins, they actually have that hair, because we're talking about hair in mammals, they have that hair in utero. So when they're a fetus, when they're developing in their mom's womb, and they're born with that hair on their rostrum, which is essentially the end of their face right above where their mouth is. Um,
Sort of nose-like.
it's very nose-like. It's not their nose because they have their nostrils on top of their head. But if it was like a land animal, that's where we would expect the nose nostrils to be. So sometimes you might hear it called snout, but technically it's a rostrum. And so that's where their hair is. It's essentially whiskers on their rostrum that after they're born, it falls out. And so at that point, dolphins are hairless. For the baleen whales, they actually keep essentially whiskers. So humpback whales are one of the easiest examples to see this in. The humpback whale has very smooth skin except for on the rostrum. And on the rostrum, they have these really obvious raised bumps. Those are called tubercles, which is just a fancy whale word for actually a hair follicle. That's what it is. It's a hair follicle, and sticking out of that tubercle, out of that bump, is a sensitive hair. It's their whisker. And so that helps them feel around their environment when they're looking for schools of fish. So they do have hair. It's not obvious, but they do have it. The other thing is mammary glands. So whales, when they're babies and when they're adults, they don't have lips like land-based mammals do. And so oftentimes land-based mammals, their mammary glands are exposed like, in nipples that babies can attach to when they're nursing. And so whales, they can't do that. They're not using their mouth to clasp onto something to nurse that milk that's produced by those mammary glands. Instead, they actually have mammary muscles. And so they have these slits, the moms, they have these slits on the bottoms of their belly. And when the baby wants milk, they can just nuzzle essentially that area, and she can squirt that milk into the water where the baby's waiting with their mouth open. But because the milk is so much denser than the water around it, it falls into their mouth. It's essentially the same, for some species, it's essentially the same fat content and consistency as cottage cheese, which is kind of gross to think about. But so those are the two main things on what makes a whale a mammal, how they fall into that family group. Yes, they are mammals.
Okay. Got it.
Um,
Whales, mammals, check.
check. Exactly.
So the question is fish.
Fish. So
What is a fish?
this takes us back. This is a fun one. I hope that your brains all hurt by this out of learning so many cool things.
I'm ready.
Ready? We're going back billions of years.
Okay.
Okay. So the Earth was formed in our solar system about 4.5 billion years ago. This is an amount of time that I feel like humans just cannot process. All right, so we're going to skip through that. It takes about 1 billion years for life to form. So scientists, through how many years of effort, that they think life was formed about 3.5 billion years ago. It was likely formed at the bottom of the ocean at these areas called hydrothermal vents. They're essentially like cracks in the ocean floor where all the heat from the inside of the Earth flows into that cold water on the outside. And with all that heat is also a lot of minerals and different substances coming out of that center of the Earth. Basically, a big old chemical experiment, right? And scientists haven't been able to recreate this, but that is that leading hypothesis. And so 3.5 billion years ago, we have a single-celled organism that existed and became the first of life on Earth. And everything after All of the species that we think of that we get to see every day and all the species that are extinct millions of years before us, just like those dinosaurs, right? We all evolved from that single-celled protist over that 3.5 billion year process. And so we have what's called like a tree of life and what's called phylogenetics, which is essentially being able to draw a family tree around maybe closest related individuals. But ultimately, everything has a common ancestor. It's just your how closely related you are to a different species is how recent that common ancestor was shared. So the more recent histories are closer, you have more of the similar genetics, you have more of the similar traits. Overall, you function as a species throughout your life in a more similar way when you have a more recent common ancestor, which is why we function and act and look nothing like a single-celled protist from 3.5 billion years ago.
And it's
So,
just like our family trees. You and your sibling have the same common parent,
mhm,
but your cousins, you share a grandparent.
exactly. If we have our single-celled protist ancestor, the very first lineage that has like the oldest traits that kind of came off from that is the sponges. So sponges are a very ancient lineage. So what that means is the sponge species we have today aren't the same species that evolved early on from that single-celled protist, but they have kind of developed those older traits and they've kind of kept those older traits throughout that lineage as different species evolved. So the
Not
next,
broken, don't fix it.
yeah, basically, that is the great way to put it. So after that was things like jellyfish. It's called the Cnidarian family. Um, so after that is essentially a family that then broke up into many, many lineages. And these are like our bugs and our worms and our roundworms and like arthropods, spiders, things like that. Those are all bugs. Um, Crabs. This is all in that like extended big family. And then next was the split between echinoderms, so starfish, and vertebrates, everything that has a spine. And that's where we're going to be working with for the rest of the day. But basically, that's the ancestor. Very oldest first lineage sponge. After that, Cnidaria, so jellyfish. After that, I put in quotation bugs because that's kind of what we think about. And then this last split is like starfish, so echinoderms, and then I just put spines, vertebrates, chordates. So this here, these two lineages, they share a more recent common ancestor than the other three. So these two, it's called two sister groups. So a spined organism, vertebrate, didn't evolve from a starfish, right?
Mm.
But they have a recent common ancestor. So if we're doing the tree thing, right, this would be like the parent, and this is like a sister and a brother. And so they have that most recent common ancestor, but they are in fact different entities that came from different things.
Yes.
Yes. So sister groups, and this is called a monophyletic group when working with these evolutionary family trees. And so it's also called like a natural clade. Um, it's just that natural grouping. So here's the actual definition here. It includes a most recent common ancestor plus all of its descendants, a natural grouping or a clade. So now that we're into the spined organisms, that is where we think of like most of the animals we interact with, right? That's the thing that when people go to the zoo, that's what they want to see. And so this thing is including amphibians and reptiles, all the mammals and birds, snakes, everything like that. That's within this group. Okay. So next was within the vertebrates. If you go into that group and expand that out, most of the lineages in that are fish. And that's where, since life evolved from the ocean, right? That's where a lot of this is based out of, is it came from the ocean, it started in the ocean. So the very first vertebrates, the very first things with spines were fish. And like back in the day, billions of years ago, the first fish didn't even have jaws. That's what we call a derived trait. So the ancestral trait was jawless. Derived, more recent trait is jawed. And so we could go into the whole fish family groups, but we're not going to. But if you look at that same kind of organization of a family tree for the fish, right? You have that chordate, that vertebrate common ancestor. And then you have that kind of old lineage that I said is the ones that without jaws. And then we go down the line. So it's basically big fish group, big fish group. And then when we get to the most recent, the last two sister groups, the two groups are lungfish and tetrapods. Tetra for pod foot. So the most recent lineage of all the fish is four-footed animals and lungfish. So humans, whales, everything on land that's walking around in 4 feet has the most recent common ancestor with the lungfish.
Hmm.
We evolved from the ocean, we evolved from fish. So this happened approximately 370 million years ago. That kind of common ancestor species is called the tiktaalik. And essentially, it kind of looks like an amphibian. It kind of has little feet to kind of crawl around on land, but they call lungfish because they have lungs so they can breathe and get air and oxygen they need in a low oxygen environment. And so essentially, some of the tiktaalik became other more recent species of lungfish that we still have today. And then the other group essentially waddled onto land and then went and explored all this land that they had, all these new resources that they had, and became all of the different species, like I said, amphibians, reptiles, and stuff that we have around us, mammals today. So that very first old four-footed, now land-based fish lineage was
Mhm.
the amphibians. And so what evolved after that are reptiles and mammals. That was that next split. And essentially what allowed mammals and reptiles to evolve is what's it's called the like amniotic egg. Yes, amniotic egg that essentially allows eggs and reproduction to happen outside of the water. So that's where we start getting those hard-shelled eggs so that lizards
Like chickens.
and chickens can live far away from the water. And that's what has allowed all of these new species that we interact with. So it's really cool. But that's called the stem reptiles. And in the stem reptile family, the major groups, turtles, snakes and lizards, um, crocodilians, birds, which dinosaurs are in with the bird lineage. And then the other one that split is stem mammals. And stem mammals then split into three main infraclasses. The oldest one are the monotremes. So that's like platypus, because they still have eggs, right? That's why they like it's oh my gosh, they have eggs. It's because they're the older lineage. And then it's the
So they have milk
marsupials.
and eggs.
They have milk and eggs.
Okay,
Yep.
so they are dairy.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very weird. They don't actually have like nipples like we would think of, or even glands like on a whale. They just secrete it off their skin and their young lick it up. It's crazy. It's crazy. Platypus are crazy. Or platypodes.
Mhm.
Um, and so monotremes, egg-laying mammals. And then after that are the marsupials. So that's like kangaroos who give birth to tiny little babies. And then it's placentals. So these are all the mammals who are essentially able to give birth to a more fully formed baby because the baby grows inside of their utero with that placenta. And now we're getting into the realm of whales because we already talked about how they're mammals. But that's the very long explanation on why it's not technically wrong in evolutionary scales to call a whale a fish. Because when you're looking at this extended family tree, tetrapods, which includes mammals, which are whales, are in a monophyletic group with lungfish.
But doesn't that make it even more incorrect to call them fish? Because what's the point of phylogeny if we don't say they're different and that they did evolve? Because we're all bird, everything's a fish then. That's not a sponge. Well, that's not an
Or
invertebrate.
jellyfish or an
Yeah.
invertebrate. Yeah.
So basically, it's just saying all vertebrates are fish. So is the definition of fish everything that's not something else?
So that is an excellent question, and I love it. And I'm really curious to see if we have any comments on this because it is kind of a weird take that people will get mad about, right? And like we humans like to categorize things. We like to define things. We like to say like this is this and that's why, right? And so unfortunately what that means is it's all how you look at it. What are you defining something by? And that has been common throughout biology and species identification for as long as we've been identifying species. First, it started out as like, does it look the same? Right? But then read the dog. Does a Chihuahua looks like a dachshund or a dachshund look like a great, German Shepherd? Like they don't look the same. So if you're going by that species identification, they would be in olden times listed as different species, right? And so then we go to the biological species definition, which is the two species, can they breed together and create viable offspring? But then as genetics has gotten so fine-tuned, now species are being labeled as subspecies that technically could have viable offspring, but are potentially being labeled as different species. So it's all in how you look at it, right? Whales are mammals. We are in the placental, or they are, I'm not a whale. They are in the placental mammal group. They have mammary glands, they have hair, they are mammals. But everything with a spine is in that same monophyletic group as fish, and fish make up most of those lineages. And so if you're looking at the evolutionary timescales and how you're defining a group of species, in that case, you can make that argument that we humans and everything that walks around on land it has a spine and has 4 feet are fish.
Yeah.
And this is something I love talking about because I remember when I learned this when I was in my undergraduate, I walked into my biology of fishes class. And on the very first day of class, my professor was wearing like a fish tie and was just like, "Welcome, fellow fishes." And we're just like, "What?" And then he's like, "Yep, you're a fish, you're a fish, you're a fish." And we're just like, "This guy is crazy." And then he showed us essentially this really zoomed out evolutionary timescale family tree. And it was like, we are within the fish group, we are a lineage of the fishes. Our sisters and cousins are fish. So it's just it just comes down to what perspective you're defining something by.
I mean, my childhood me would love it because all I wanted to be was a mermaid. So who
Well,
knows?
I
Maybe
guess
that's
that's another question. Like, all right, are there mermaids? Let's say if we're fish, where's our tail and gills? And
hmm
that's same thing as with whales. A lot can be gleaned from studying an animal when it's forming in utero for our mammal species. And so humans in utero have tails, right? Humans in the very, very, very early stages. The same part, the same genetic coding that becomes gills in fish become our bottom jaw. And so looking at those genetics and looking at what a species looks like while it's still developing gives us a lot of that evolutionary history that is missed by the time that animal is born. Because when it's born, it's essentially getting rid of all those past traits that they don't need to exist in their current form. Sorry, Keiko. I got excited. I was talking with my hands. I just knocked Keiko off my chair.
You got overwhelmed with biology.
Overwhelmed. Yes, yes. So this is what I mean. Like fascinating stuff that will probably give you a headache, but it's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. I mean, I feel like we've covered it. We we
Yeah.
we I mean, we got whales,
Hmm.
or mammals
Hmm.
like us,
Hmm.
placental mammals specifically. Okay.
Very good.
But we're vertebrates.
Yep.
And all vertebrates come from the fish piz. Fishes are our sister cousin, nephew brothers. And so, sort of fish.
Hmm.
Zooming forward, dolphins, whales.
Hmm.
There's two types of whales. You got tooth baleen.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
that's a lot to cover for a first episode.
Yeah. I was a little nervous, but you got it. You got it. You absorbed.
I've learned
You've learned.
Ready for my test,
Hmm.
teacher?
Yeah. I guess like typically people would define a fish as something that like has gills and breathes underwater and not all of them have scales, not all of them have jaws, so it's still like
Not all of them have bones.
yeah,
Some are cartilaginous.
exactly. So even how you define a fish is really vague and big.
Yep.
So
So, Kyla, I feel like my knowledge is satiated for the moment. You have answered my question for whales and fish.
you're gonna make so many people mad by saying yes.
I will. I'm going to tell everyone at work tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Well, with that, wrapping up our very first episode of Coffee with Keiko, where we talked about, is it wrong to call a whale a fish and that deep evolutionary history? That was some dense stuff today, and I hope you had fun listening. We're gonna, talk more about whales in future episodes. Things like, I guess, what's in a name? Why are killer whales black and white? Things that are not going to be drawing family trees on a paper. So,
But now
yeah,
we're solid with knowledge.
exactly.
Got our foundation
Yeah, we
for
defined what a
when,
mammal is and a
yeah,
fish.
and a
Yes,
fish,
and a
sort of.
spine, sort of. So next week, if you tune in and join us for us, we're going to be interviewing a guest. We've got a guest interview, Adriana. She is a aspiring marine biologist, doing a lot of great work. Has worked with research labs with octopus as well as with whales. She's worked with humpback whales, gray whales, and also Hawaiian mug seals, which is not a whale but a marine mammal. So tune in. Follow us on YouTube if you like this. This is my first time saying that, so it's weird. Happy to be here, but we'll have all the links in the description and get better at this as we go.
Yep. Well,
Thanks. Bye.
adios.